Together. Love bears up under anything and everything that comes, is ever ready to believe the best of every person. Its hopes are fadeless under all circumstances and endures everything without weakening. You know what love does? Love begins by believing the best in that person. Because the moment you stop believing in that person, you know what happens? It becomes almost impossible to love that person that you no longer believe the best in. Now, I know this is especially true when it comes to married life. And you might say to me, but Pastor, I got good reasons not to believe in the person I'm married to. They are angry, they're bitter, they fight all the time. They're selfish, they're egotistical, they are prideful, they're blah, 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 blah. I got all this proof not to believe in them. Well, now stop for a moment. What is believe? It says love believes the best. Believe is what? It is trusting in something that you have no physical evidence. Did you hear me? Isn't that the definition of faith? Faith is the evidence of things, come on, not seen. So you say to me, but Pastor, what I am seeing in my spouse gives me reason not to believe in them. Well, that's the point. It did not say love knows the best. It says love believes the best. That means you have to decide to believe in your spouse even if they are providing evidence to the contrary. Even if they're showing you reasons not to believe in them. Faith believes anyway. Love believes in them when even you don't have evidence. Think about the prodigal father. Did he not believe in his son who was very selfish, who was sleeping with prostitutes, who was squandering his money on alcohol and parties and orgies? He had every reason not to believe in his son because his son gave him no evidence to have confidence in him. But when his son came back, what was the father doing? Was he in his living room sulking, saying, my son's never going to come back. He's such a rotten scoundrel. I just might as well count him as dead. No. What was he doing? The father was looking afar off every day to see if his son would ever come home. Every morning he would look to see if his son was coming home. In other words, he was believing that his son was going to see the light and come to his senses and return back home. And even right now, you have some husbands, some wives that are like that prodigal. And they have given you every reason to give up on them. They've given you every reason to stop believing in them. But you know what love does? Love believes even though you don't see any results. And that father was believing in his son even though his son gave him no reason to believe in him. I think of Gavin MacLeod. How many of y'all remember Gavin MacLeod? The Love Boat captain, Murray on Mary Tyler Moore show. Well, what many of you don't know is his Christian testimony. Before he became a Christian, when he experienced all this fame, he let it go to his head. And he abandoned the wife of his youth. He got into alcoholism, was drinking very heavily, and then met this cult woman, this cult leader. And he began to follow this woman in this cultish lifestyle because she provided for him some sort of peace, I guess he felt. And they end up having a romantic affair. And it was broadcast on television all the time. I mean, what Gavin MacLeod was doing. The Love Boat captain has abandoned the love of his life to follow this new love. Well, now, his wife, Patty, came to Christ. And she went to a church just like ours where she was hearing about faith, that you can believe God for miracles and that God can turn the hopeless situation and make it hopeful, that nothing is impossible with God. And so she got a bunch of prayer partners and said, pray for my husband, Gavin MacLeod. This is not like him. The man I married was a very sweet and kind man. This is not like him to go into alcoholism. It's not like him. I don't know a man like this to go off and leave his family to go with this woman. This is not him. Let's believe God for a miracle. And she got a bunch of prayer partners to get in agreement with her in prayer. Well, now, she also read in the scriptures, faith without action is dead. So she started to think, if I really believe that my husband's coming back home, then I'm going to act like he's home. So she actually began to talk to him at his house, at her home, as if he's there. Now that might have been weird. Now she wasn't losing her mind. She was just acting like he's there. And then she would, at dinner time, she'd always set another placemat for her husband. And every night she would eat by herself, and she would look at that placemat, and she would imagine Gavin MacLeod sitting there having dinner with her. Because she's believing. See, what is she doing? Love believes the best. Gavin wasn't giving her any reasons to believe, but she's believing. And then one day, she gets a knock on the door. And as she opens it, there's her husband, Gavin MacLeod. And he looks and says, I don't know, would you be willing for me to come back home? She said, what do you mean, dummy? Get over here. We got a placemat for you. Dinner's ready. She brought him in, and he walked in, and there was a plate. He said, what's this? She says, I always believed in the best. I always believed God would touch you one day and bring you back home. And that's what this plate mat is all about. How many of y'all know that's unconditional love? And you know, that's what God offers us. Even though we may be backslidden and not really serving God, He doesn't abandon us. He doesn't give up on us. He still absolutely believes in us. And what I'm saying is, in a marriage, the most important thing you have to have is belief and faith in each other. And yes, maybe your spouse is not giving you reasons to believe. But Gavin wasn't giving Patty any reasons to believe. But in faith, she held on to God's word that God would turn her husband around. And it came to pass. See, because love's hopes are fadeless under all circumstances. And I know when you're in a marriage that's not working and you hear things from your spouse that is just meant to destroy every bit of confidence, it's easy to give up. You hear your spouse say, I don't love you anymore. Or you hear your spouse say, you know, I don't think I was in love when I married you. Or you hear your spouse said, I made a mistake in marrying you. I wasn't ready for it. And then you hear, I want a divorce. And you're thinking, what's the point of believing? But you know what? Love believes the best in that person, because you know the person you married. You know how kind they were and how thoughtful they were, and now you don't see that anymore. Well, you know it's in them, but something has happened along the way to cause them to drift away, like that prodigal, like Gavin MacLeod. And I'm here to tell you, as a spouse, your love cannot give up on that person. And I believe God is speaking to some people right now about putting your faith once again in God, that He could change your spouse and bring your spouse back to his or her senses.